let's turn to this. So this is something that really interests me. And again, I approach this as a layman. I'm a photographer, right? I'm not a philosopher. But one area of interest for me is epistemology. So one question that really interests me is whether or not belief in God can be rational apart from argumentation. So what's your stance on
Oh,
that?
yes, entirely so. It's always, in my view, always rational to believe that things are the way they seem to be in the absence of counter-evidence. Uh, there's a number of words for this principle. I call it the principle of credulity. That is to say, the rational person is the credulous person, the person who believes everything in the absence of counter-evidence. So, I mean, you're right to believe that you're sitting in a chair interviewing me. You don't need an argument for that. It's so obvious. But of course, somebody can wake you up and show you're only having a dream. That would show you were mistaken. So the principle is always, in the absence of counter-evidence, it's rational to believe things are what they see. So, person's brought up in a closed religious community and has a deep religious experience. It's obvious to him there's a God. He's right to believe it. Fair enough. But he may come out into the outside world and be presented with counter-arguments, and then he may need to consider them if his religious experience isn't very strong and these arguments seem appealing. Likewise, it's rational to believe there's a God if the wisest person in your community tells you there's a God and there's no other person to tell you there's a God, because it's always rational to believe what people tell you in the absence of counter-evidence. This is another basic epistemological principle of testimony. So, yes, sure, but in the modern world we are exposed to a lot of counter-arguments. And many people don't have deep religious experiences, and whatever testimony they get from others, it's a varied kind. In the modern world, most people, I think, need arguments. Less people needed arguments in the Middle Ages in closed communities. But a similar situation existed in the 4th century AD, just after Christianity had been legalized in the Roman Empire. There were innumerable different philosophical and religious positions around, and people needed an argument to believe well of them. So I don't
So when you say they needed an argument, are you saying like psychologically that was a need for them, or is that like a
no,
epistemological?
rationally they need an argument because if we're talking about the 4th century, many of them didn't have, as with us, many didn't have deep religious experiences. They couldn't rely on the testimony of experts because the experts had different views. So they've got to sort it out for themselves, and sorting out for themselves means assessing the arguments.